welcome to today's Pet Pawcast. I'm your host, Dr. Roberta Westbrook, and you're here with us at the Campus for All Animals, the Houston SPCA. We have some interesting information for you today. We are going to talk about deafness in dogs. So if you have questions related to your pet's hearing or maybe hearing loss, or how do you know if your pet's hearing is appropriate, then place those in the chat and hopefully I can help you today with those questions. But thank you for joining us as always. I want to start by introducing you to a wonderful pet of the week. This is Journi. Such a sweet girl. She has come to us as a puppy, and unfortunately, Journi's family could not continue care for her, so Journi is looking for a new family to bring her into their family. She is such a sweet dog. She loves to cuddle. She loves to roll over. She loves to interact and play ball. So she would make a wonderful, wonderful family pet. So rub that belly and let her see how she just loves to roll over. She would make some wonderful family pet. So please consider coming on down to our adoption center and visiting with all of our animals that we have available for adoption. We'd love to have you here in our adoption center every day from 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. Well, let's get started talking about deafness in dogs. What questions can I start helping you with?
So what causes deafness in dogs?
Yes, that's a wonderful place to start. What causes it? And generally, there are two big categories of the cause of deafness in dogs. The first category is what we call congenital deafness. What congenital deafness means is that your dog may be born deaf. And the causes for being born deaf are usually related to genetics and some sort of anatomical abnormality. So this means that there was something wrong in the development of the structures of the ear that allow the dog to process sound. So that is probably the more common cause of deafness, which is congenital, or the dog was born with deafness. The other category is what we call acquired deafness. Acquired deafness is something that happens usually later in life. It can sometimes be caused by inflammation or infection in the ear or structures of the ear. It can also be caused as the animal ages, as your pet ages. Sometimes the structures that help to process sound begin to degenerate and the hearing is not as effective as it was when the pet is younger. So there are two broad categories of causes. Your veterinarian can help narrow it down because depending on the cause may determine what we do to treat it.
And then how do we know if our dog is going deaf if they weren't born with it?
Right, so how do you know if your dog is deaf? What are the signs? So typically, if the deafness is congenital, one of the things that you're going to notice, even in a puppy, is that your puppy may not be responsive to sound. So if you're calling your puppy by the name and he or she does not turn around to look, or you don't see movement in the ears where they perk up, these could be signs that your dog is deaf. Another sign is you startle your puppy pretty easily. So if your puppy is sleeping or not looking at you or facing at you and you approach, sometimes because they did not hear you approach, they can be startled by your presence. The other thing is not responding to loud noises. So one of the tests that we sometimes do in the veterinary clinic to determine whether a puppy is deaf is to create a loud noise. Usually we stand behind the puppy and we take two stainless steel food or water bowls, something that would create a really loud noise, and we bang those things together. And ideally, what we want is for the puppy to become startled or to see some movement in the ears. But oftentimes, if they're deaf, they will not respond to that at all. Now, as your pet gets older, how will you know if your pet's hearing is degenerating?
Or they're just ignoring us?
Yeah, that's a great point. Are they ignoring you and having selective hearing, or are they truly having some trouble with hearing and processing sound? And that can be difficult to determine, but certainly as your pet ages, you may notice that they are not paying attention to you quite as well. They sleep much more soundly and they don't wake up with some of the sounds that they used to when they were younger. Sometimes that can indicate that the hearing is going away. You may not notice that their ears are perking up quite as much, or you may have to elevate your voice, But if you elevate your voice or a sound is elevated and you're getting a response, then they probably still have some hearing, and you will know that maybe it's degenerating, it's getting less, but they can still hear.
And how do we communicate with a dog if we're going to adopt one, or if the dog was already born deafness?
Right, so it can be kind of a big task to take on at first if you were not aware that your puppy was deaf, or you're having a deaf pet for the first time. It can seem like a daunting task, but it can absolutely be rewarding, and you can still have a wonderful relationship with your dog, even if he or she is deaf. So the thing that we do with training with deaf dogs is make sure that we have universal hand signals. The first thing that you need to be able to do with a deaf dog is get your dog's attention. Because you won't be able to call your dog's name, then you need to be able to come up with some way to get your dog's attention regularly. One of the easiest ways to do this is by touch. So if you want to get your dog's attention, come up with a gentle touch that you can repeat that will tell your dog, hey, pay attention to me, look at me. Generally, one of the ways to do this is to take your hand and just touch your pet on the butt, on the rump, or on the head, or maybe on the back between the shoulder blades, some location that's easy to get to, that every time you touch your pet, that tells your pet, focus on me. When they do that, when they turn and face you, reward them with a treat. Because when you do that and you reward them, they associate your touch, one, with focus, but two, with a reward. And that's going to be the first step in getting your pet to focus on you. The next step is, once they are focused on you, you can begin implementing very common and universal hand signals to tell your pet what you want them to do. For example, if you want to teach your pet how to sit, one of the universal signs for sit, especially if you have a treat, is to make an upward hand motion. And you can look at your pet and you can say, sit, sit. And when your pet sits, then you can reward them with a treat. If your pet, obviously, the first couple times is not going to know what this means, you're going to have to direct your pet to sit by pushing their butt down and getting them to sit and form the motion. And as they sit, you can give them a treat. And being repetitive is going to be the key. You can look online for other common universal hand signals for deaf dogs to assist you with your training. For example, if you want your dog to come to you, you can say come. And if you want your dog to lie down, you can say down. You can say down. If you want them to stay, holding your hand up, open, and asking them to stay. Those are some of the hand signals that you can use to get your pet to still communicate well with you, and they can do what you're asking them to do.
And obviously they won't be able to hear their name if they get lost in a crowd. What are some tips to that, or make sure that the pet gets returned to us if they get lost in for one reason or another?
Yes, one of the best things to do is just to prevent this from happening. So if you have a deaf dog, making sure that your dog is on a leash is going to be really, really important and critical for their safety, so that we can prevent a lost pet in the first place. So keeping your pet on a leash, but certainly accidents happen. So if accidents happen and your deaf dog has gotten away from you and you're not able to call them, another way that you can potentially get your dog to get their attention if they're not close to you and you can't touch them is to use a flashlight or a pin light. Using a flashlight or a pin light in their field of vision can also be a clue to get them to focus on you. So if your pet is further away from you and you can still use either a flashlight when it's dark or a pin light during the day, and they can see that, and you've trained them to focus on you, that might be another way to get their attention. But however, if your dog has run away and you're not able to recall them easily, the best thing to do is, again, try to reunite with your dog as soon as possible. The best way to do that is to make sure your dog has a microchip. Having a microchip will allow for your dog to be reunited with you if your dog winds up either in a veterinary hospital or an animal shelter. All pets will be scanned with a microchip scanner, and that microchip number is linked to your contact information. So always make sure that your pet has proper identification, including a microchip, a collar with a tag on it that has your pet's name and your name and contact information, and those are going to be the best ways to get your pet back to you.
One myth that we hear all the time is that all dogs that are kind of pure white, or what we think as albino, are deaf. Is that true, or what is some science behind that?
Yes, that's actually true. And in that, dogs that have more white coat color, or particularly dogs that have kind of the spotted, what we call merle or dapple coat colors, they are more prone to deafness. And the reason is the cells that create pigment, we call them pigment cells, the cells that make the coat color dark, are also present in the ear. And if those cells are not present, that can affect transmission of sound to the brain. Pigment cells actually play a pretty big role in transmitting sound from the ear to the brain. So if you have a white dog that is lacking in pigment cells, those pigment cells are actually lacking all over the body, including in the ear, and that can affect their hearing. So it isn't 100%, but they definitely have a higher chance of being deaf. And if you're wanting to definitively determine whether or not your pet is deaf, there are tests that your veterinarian can perform or a specialist can perform. The main test to determine hearing in your pet by a specialist is called a Bayer test. It's BAER, and it stands for Brainstem Auditory Evoked Response Test. A Bayer test is a test where your pet can be taken in to a specialist, someone who's trained to test pets for hearing loss, and they will use these electrodes that they'll stick under the skin around the head and the ear. Once they put the electrodes underneath the skin, they will use a computer to send sound waves through those electrodes. If your pet is able to hear that sound and transmit the sound, it usually sounds like a series of clicks. Then on the computer screen, we're able to see signs. It shows up on the computer stem as a wave. So those electrodes will transmit a wave to the computer screen, and that's what we want to be able to see if your pet has normal hearing. If your pet is not able to hear those clicks or those sounds and process that sound, oftentimes we don't see any of those normal waves on the computer screen. So there is a Bayer test that your pet can have if you're concerned that your pet may have hearing loss and you want to have a test done.
And if our pet, did lose the hearing loss with time or from an ear infection, is there any possibility of getting any of that hearing back if it's like from an ear infection?
That's a great question. So if the hearing loss is related to an inflammation or ear infection, sometimes the hearing can come back. As a matter of fact, there are some medications that we actually need to put into the ear to treat the ear infection that can affect hearing temporarily as well. So there's some medication that we use inside the ear that when we put it inside the ear, it can temporarily affect hearing, but usually once the ear infection goes away, the inflammation goes away, that hearing can come back. But your veterinarian can talk to you about how to navigate that and how to make sure that we do the best to protect your pet's hearing.
And I'm sure, deaf dogs that come that are through the shelter have a little bit more harder time to get adopted out. What are some tips if we want to adopt, or somebody that's not sure if they're able to adopt a dog with special needs like deafness?
Yes, it's really wonderful for those families who are able to dedicate time and have a commitment to those pets with special needs, because it does take some time and it takes some commitment and it takes patience. And so if you're wondering about adopting a pet with special needs, you can do some research. Try to determine whether or not your schedule will allow for proper training, whether or not you're going to be able to spend additional time to learn a new language, for example, to learn sign language to help train your pet. And so it just takes a little bit extra time and commitment, but if you have developed a relationship with your pet, this time and commitment is nothing compared to the love and the bond that you're going to experience over the lifetime of your pet and the lives that you're going to spend together. So you can do a little research. You can talk to our veterinary staff and our adoption staff, and we can help you to answer some questions and give you information about what this may require. Well, we thank you so much for joining us here on the Pet Pawcast. I want to encourage you, if you need medical care for your pet, particularly vaccines or heartworm tests or deworming, or you need preventive care for your pet, please come on down to our Animal Medical Center, to our Pet Wellness Clinic, and we can see your pet. We're glad to announce that on August 17th was our opening day for the Pet Wellness Clinic, and on that day we began to see pets that already have families and who are looking for veterinarians who are able to provide preventative health care for your pet. So we're able to provide that care for your pet. If you need a heartworm test or heartworm prevention or flea and tick prevention, or maybe you need to have your pet microchipped because you want to make sure your pet does not get lost, we can provide those services to you. So please go online to our website, HoustonSPCA.org. Click on the link that says Pet Wellness Clinic and Pharmacy, and you'll get more information about the services that we provide. You can walk on in any day, Thursday through Sunday, from 10 a.m. to 5:30. We accept walk-ins. You're welcome. Or if you'd like to make an appointment, you can do that as well. But we'd be happy to help you with your pet to provide the health care that you need. So come on down and see us either in our adoption center or our Pet Wellness Clinic. Thank you for joining us again, and we will see you next week on the Pet Pawcast.